find in 230 feet of water is a German U-boat from World War II.
That proved that the wreck was a German U-boat from World War II.
At 240 feet below the surface and 60 miles off the coast of New Jersey, a team of divers found what shouldn't have been there, a fully intact German submarine, unlisted on any chart, silent and nameless.
Some of my sources that I have here of known wrecks off the East Coast, and there was no known wreck at that exact position.
It was the kind of discovery that rewrites endings, because for half a century, the world believed U-869 had vanished near Morocco. But the wreck told a different story, one buried not just under silt, but under decades of assumptions, intelligence gaps, and administrative shortcuts. And it all began with a dive into the cold Atlantic, where a mystery waited in metal silence. The nameless wreck. It began like any other wreck dive, an exchange between fishermen and divers, trading coordinates for calmer waters. But when the RV, research vessel Seeker, anchored above the suggested site, what the team found was far from ordinary. Descending through the frigid waters, dive master John Chatterton trained his flashlight on something massive resting on the seabed. A steel hull, curved, intact, unmistakably German. A World War II submarine. The wreck had no name, no hull number, no flags or emblems. It sat upright, sealed by sediment, as if waiting. At 240 feet deep, identification wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. Compressed air threatened narcosis, and the cold made every minute on the bottom a calculated risk. But Chatterton and his team kept returning, driven not by treasure, but by mystery. No German U-boat was officially listed as missing in these waters. According to history, nothing should have been there. What began as curiosity quickly turned into a contradiction. The sub's design pointed to a Type 9 C/40, long-range, heavily armed, built for missions deep into Allied waters. But this class of U-boat had only a handful of candidates that matched the time period and mission profile. One of them was U-869, a submarine supposedly lost off the coast of Africa in February 1945. If this was U-869, then the official record was wrong, terribly wrong, and the truth, long buried beneath wartime paperwork and assumptions, was about to surface. A submarine without a grave. U-869 was launched in Bremen in early 1944, one of Germany's ocean runners, designed to travel far, carry 22 torpedoes, and disrupt Allied supply lines with precision. By the autumn of that year, the war had turned against the Nazis, but U-boat command still believed in one last gamble: reach the American coast and sink ships at their doorstep. U-869, under Captain Helmut Neubauer, was ordered to patrol southeast of New York. But somewhere along the route, things changed, or so it seemed. A later order redirected the submarine to Gibraltar, a shift the High Command assumed had gone through. Yet after January 6, 1945, U-869 sent no further messages. It was never heard from again. After the war, Allied historians tried to match each missing U-boat with an enemy action. In U-869's case, a vague attack near Rabat on February 28th became the placeholder explanation. No wreckage was found, no bodies recovered. Still, the incident was upgraded post-war from no damage to probably sunk, and the record was filed as closed. Families of the 56 crewmen were given a version of events based on absence, not evidence. Memorials cited Rabat. Museums marked the grave there. And for decades, no one questioned it. Yet the ocean off New Jersey told another story. The wreck wasn't a myth. It was physical, cold, and undeniable. If U-869 had gone down near New York, then every official report, every map, and every message sent home had been built on a mistake. Divers versus the archive. For technical divers like John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, the unknown wreck became more than a mystery. It became an obsession. At 240 feet, each descent demanded not just precision, but survival. Standard air wasn't safe at that depth. Instead, they relied on trimix, a blend of helium, oxygen, and nitrogen, to stay alert and functional. Even then, they had mere minutes to work before the long, dangerous ascent began. The first clues were subtle but chilling. In 1993, Chatterton recovered a table knife from inside the wreck, its handle etched with a name, Hornberg. Back on land, they cross-referenced it with wartime records. Martin Hornberg had served as a radio man aboard U-869. It was the first real crack in the archive's version of events. But skepticism lingered, even among fellow divers. Some believed the knife could have been transferred from another sub, or perhaps lost at sea and carried by current. More proof was needed. The divers kept returning, probing deeper into the submarine's compartments, slowly unearthing a story the paperwork had long buried. The cost of that pursuit was steep. In 1991, diver Steve Feldman lost consciousness inside the wreck and drowned. A year later, Chris Rouse and his son attempted a dive using compressed air. When the younger Rouse became trapped, the father fought to free him. But in doing so, they exhausted their air and made a desperate, fatal ascent. Both died of decompression sickness. 3 lives lost in search of a forgotten submarine. After those tragedies, many walked away. But Chatterton and Kohler couldn't, not with the unanswered questions still lying below. If this truly was U-869, then it meant that decades of naval history, wartime intelligence, and official truth had missed the mark. And the only way to prove it was to find the name. The plate that changed everything. For 6 years, the team dove in near silence. Publicly, the wreck was still referred to only as U-Who. Privately, every descent was an attempt to find the one thing that could settle the debate beyond question, a manufacturer's plate bearing the submarine's hull number. Deep inside the engine room, under layers of sediment and rust, that answer finally revealed itself. On August 31st, 1997, John Chatterton returned from a dive carrying a small metal plate, corroded but intact. After careful cleaning aboard the Seeker, the numbers emerged. Not a guess, not a hunch. Engraved in steel were 5 unmistakable characters: U-869. There was no room for interpretation. The wreck was real, the identity confirmed. A submarine long thought lost off the coast of Morocco had been resting just 60 miles from New York. The ocean hadn't lied. The documents had. The implications rippled far beyond the dive team. Naval historians were forced to revise databases, maps, and textbooks. Institutions like uboat.net updated their listings, correcting decades of misinformation. But facts on paper could not convey the emotional shift. Families who had lived with vague memorials in Africa were now learning the truth. Their sons, brothers, and husbands had died off the American coast, not in distant waters. And yet, even with the hull identified, one question remained unanswered. How had U-869 ended up here, within reach of United States shores, and why had no one noticed its destruction? If the submarine had been sunk near New Jersey, then someone, somewhere, must have fired the shots that sent it down. The next chapter of the story wouldn't come from the wreck. It would come from the records in the quiet margins of war diaries and sonar logs, where one letter had buried the truth beneath official certainty. The secret that hid the truth. Long before the divers recovered the nameplate, a different kind of evidence had been quietly sitting in the files, written not in steel, but in code. In January 1945, Allied intelligence, particularly the British Ultra program, intercepted and decrypted German naval messages. These pointed to a U-boat moving westward across the Atlantic, heading straight toward the east coast of the United States. Unknown to the divers decades later, Ultra had already painted a rough picture of U-869's true trajectory. But then, something happened. A single garbled message, corrupted either by atmospheric interference, encryption error, or simple misinterpretation, led United States and British Naval Command to believe the submarine had been redirected to Gibraltar. With no confirmation from the sub itself, Allied analysts filled in the blanks with what seemed logical. They assumed the order had gone through, and the more they assumed, the further they drifted from reality. That assumption, however, was not openly acknowledged. To protect the existence of Ultra, the top-secret British code-breaking operation, many of the resulting operational decisions were deliberately attributed to less sensitive sources, like radio direction finding or shipboard sonar. Even internal reports masked their true origin to preserve secrecy. As a result, the narrative built around U-869's supposed movements was not just wrong, it was designed to look convincingly right, supported by plausible but incomplete data. This was not deception out of malice, but necessity. Yet the consequences were lasting. An entire crew was marked as lost in the wrong ocean, buried by paperwork that couldn't or wouldn't reveal its source. The submarine's final moments weren't just lost at sea, they were filtered, rerouted, and archived into silence. Only decades later, with the physical wreck confirmed and the ultra-files declassified, did it become clear. The truth had been visible but untouchable. A battle recorded as silence. On the night of February 11, 1945, as convoy CU-58 made its way east of New Jersey, two United States Navy destroyer escorts, Howard D. Crow and Coiner, detected a sonar contact. The Crow launched a Hedgehog salvo, a forward-firing pattern of explosives that only detonated upon direct contact. Moments later, Coiner followed with depth charges. Two separate underwater explosions were recorded, but there was no oil slick, no debris, and nothing rose to the surface. With the convoy continuing on schedule and no material evidence of destruction, the incident was filed under the Naval Assessment Code, G, no damage. It was a conservative label, used frequently in the fog of war. Later reviews would reconsider it as probably sunk, but by then, the event had already faded into the background of hundreds of similar entries. Years later, when the wreck was identified as U-869, researchers returned to that long-forgotten engagement. The location of the sonar contact matched the wreck's coordinates within just 4.5 miles, and the damage to the hull, two separate blast zones, 75 feet apart, mirrored the kind of explosive pattern consistent with both a Hedgehog strike and follow-up depth charges. The submarine had been destroyed. It just hadn't been believed.